Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 6th meeting of the Board of Selectmen Sewer Commissioners. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman, all 5 selectmen are present, as is Attorney Bowen and Interim Town Administrator Mr. Sullivan.
Any announcements?
Don't believe so. We do have the Veterans Day Parade. Will be on Monday, our big Veterans Day celebration. And I believe it starts at, I didn't print it out, 10 a.m., 10:30? 10:30. So hopefully we'll see everybody there. And that's all the announcements I have.
Yellow folder there. Oh, that announcement folder.
Yeah, this.
Just a reminder that the Affordable Housing Trust will be meeting on Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in this building in room 225 to conduct a public hearing of the Affordable Housing Plan. This is something that by law is required to be generated periodically. It's a draft plan, and the public is free to show up and take a look at it. Copies of it are available at the town clerk's office, and I believe also the planning department. So if you're interested in this, that's when it's going to happen.
Mr. Slavin.
We have an event called Toast the Teachers, done by the Foundation for Wareham Education. It's a fundraiser. It's going to be November 27th from 6 to 9 o'clock, which is a Tuesday, at Piper's. The tickets are $30 in advance, $20 for teachers, and I believe it's going to be $35 at the door. There's a cash bar, and there's wine sangria, and I believe there's going to be hors d'oeuvres as well. Also, the Frosty train ride, which used to be the Polar Express. There are a few tickets still left. You have to get a hold of the Wareham Village Association. They have a website, but there are some tickets left. Thank you.
Mrs. Begley.
There's a public hearing tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the Board of Health in their usual spot, the cafeteria over at Town Hall, and it's the water quality regulations.
Mr. Holmes. That would conclude this evening's announcements.
Hi. Anybody here to speak to the board during citizens' participation? No? You can put your hand down, duly noted. I'll go right ahead. Why don't you use that one there, if you can. Oh, there's a holder.
I'm going to let Eleanor go first because she has just one quick thing that she wants to mention before we get into what we wanted to bring up to you.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know that the Onset Bay Association is going to be having a New Year's Eve party, and it's going to be at Bay Point, and the tickets are going to be $50 per person. It's going to include the appetizers in the buffet, and at 12:30, and we're going to have coffee and dessert, and it's going to have live music.
And the live music is actually a band called Image, and Eleanor and her husband and my husband and myself went and listened to them, and we think they're great, and we think if you want to do something fun and different New Year's Eve that you should come and enjoy them because they're really a great band. What we're here for this evening, the Summer Celebration Committee met yesterday, and in the course of our conversation as we got started, 2 of our members brought up that they had relatives who have been affected by the hurricane that hit New York and New Jersey. And so we started to have a conversation about what we could do as individuals and or groups, but then we realized that you had an agenda item later in your agenda. So because it's an agenda item, we weren't sure you would allow any speakers. So we just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you.
We can take that up now.
Okay.
That was Mrs. Winslow's item. We can just do it right now. It's fine. Do it all at once.
Okay. We had a couple of thoughts for you as we sat there and tossed some ideas back and forth. Rudy is very passionate and gets very excited about some of the causes that we tend to get ourselves involved in. And we realized that this is something that the entire town should be involved in, not just a few people. So we sort of put our collective heads together and came up with the thought that we'd like to share with you, that perhaps we could have a community meeting and have a representative from every group and organization meet maybe one day next week. And if they would send one person from their group, you don't want it to get too cumbersome, but if you had one person, with the realization that every group and organization in town has an email list, a mailing list, a contact list, and it would be a real easy way to get the message out to numbers of people. And that group, if they met with perhaps the emergency management team who has all the contacts with FEMA, the Red Cross, and all of the agencies that they work with during a disaster, they would be able to come together with a plan of where the community could go and what we could do as a whole community. And there's lots of options. For example, we have J.P. Noonan in town. J.P. Noonan transports water. They transport fuel. Perhaps as a community, we could pool our resources together and come up with and pay for a whole truckload of gas and send it down, or water that's desperately needed. We have South Shore Generator. I know they have industrial-sized generators. Maybe we could pool our resources and pay to rent a generator for a month or so and pay for the transport of that down. But there's a lot of local resources that we have, even if it's just to go down with a load of lumber or tools or things that are badly needed. But by pulling everybody together that can put the collective thoughts together rather than having just small individuals come up with something small, I think as a whole town we could adopt a neighborhood, perhaps through maybe one of the local churches down there, from a connection of a church here, so that we maybe pick up with just one neighborhood and take care of a neighbor and become a good neighbor to that neighborhood. So I don't know if they want to add anything to it, but that's basically what we were thinking of yesterday, and we just wanted to share it with you.
Mrs. Winslow?
Well, thank you. I think your ideas are great. I've had a lot of emails I posted on Facebook that I was looking for ideas. There's a lot of businesses in the community that are willing to be drop-off points for items. You're thinking on a much larger scale than I was, so I appreciate that. My biggest concern, and the public doesn't know this, but my mother lived in New Jersey for many, many years. We have very close friends there, and I was able to speak with one over the weekend very quickly. And she said something to me, which is where the idea came from, and that was, we're devastated here, but for us, you know, we'll persevere. But there are so many out there that already rely on charity, animal shelters and organizations like our Turning Point that are desperate for supplies because the people that were supporting them, the soup kitchens, aren't able to support them. They either can't purchase what they once would because the stores have been flooded and are closed, or they can't transport the goods because the roads are closed and there is no fuel. So I think getting a meeting together, and if you good people, you know and have the contacts to these organizations, you just tell me when and where, and I'll be happy to be there. I feel terrible about what happened. I watched through Facebook posts as a friend of mine lost everything she owned and held dear to her while she ran for her life from a storm surge. So it's had a very dramatic effect on me. And I've heard from a lot of people, and people want to do things. They want to help. And it's great. I donated my $10 by my, through my phone to the Red Cross, but sometimes that doesn't feel like enough. Sometimes you feel like you need to really do something to show these folks that we do care about them and we feel for their situation. So I'm all for it. If we can get a truck of water, a fuel truck down there, whatever we can do. And if we can get in touch with that is, the key is to get it through an organization. I did speak with somebody, I forget what agency it was, but they said, please do not drive down here in a U-Haul because this is becoming a real problem. They don't want that. So it's got to be done correctly for it to really have any impact.
Yeah, Madam Chair. One of the things that
Rudy, excuse me. I think you can pull that one over that computer. I'm pretty sure it'll reach you.
One of the things that came to in my mind was that this is a long-term situation. I also lived in Staten Island for a few years. My family still lives there. But beside that point, this is going to be a very long time for our citizens and for our people we love. One of the things that I'm thinking about, or I just want to mention that if it's possible, we could get right away a meeting like Madam Chair said, and we do. Send a trailer truck down. I'll run in front of it if I have to. I don't mean it. But long term, I'm sure the town has big facilities somewhere that, and the town could contribute all kinds of things and stock it in that particular place. In maybe 2 or 3 months, when the need is still there, we could go to that place with a J.P. Noonan and deliver another trailer truck. Something like that. It's just an idea. And I'm sure the people of this town who are generous, who would deliver or who would give certain things to help out other people in this country that is in need. And that's something to think about, Mr. Holmes and this chairman, selectman. Is there a facility somewhere in this place that could be worked out that the town could donate and keep there, and we could work out the particulars? I know that Chief Duffy. I was so whatever, and I called him, and he was so responsive, and I'm sure the police will do whatever they need to do. Call ahead and see if we can send a truck, logistically and what have you. But if we could think about out of the box for long term, the first need is for water, food, or whatever have you. But let's think long term, that we could have a place that 2 months from now they need a load of diapers or something. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
I think those are great ideas, and they could be funneled through that group. The other Rudy I listened to the other Rudy this morning, and he mentioned a group called TwinTowers.org. Did you catch that? Mm-hmm. So it's another group that is local in that area, and he suggested this morning that if people want to do something, to contact that group as opposed to the Red Cross or some of these others.
Red Cross is just inundated.
Yeah.
That was something that we had talked about. We'd rather not do a big agency. We wanted to maybe get a hold of a community, neighborhood, a church, and find out what they need and keep with that same group.
You don't need to be, you don't need to be paying for somebody's overhead.
Exactly. That's exactly what we don't want to do.
Well, and I hope too that we'll keep the pets at the forefront of our mind, because as people have lost their homes and are forced to rent, they're not allowed to keep their pets. I know my girlfriend, who lost her home, had to find another place for her pets immediately, and a lot of people just don't have a choice. And the shelters do rely heavily on, obviously, water and fuel and diapers and food is, the priorities, but it's heart-wrenching for somebody to have to, separate themselves from their furry family member.
I think you're right, Mrs. Winslow. When you go through a tragedy, there's always the big things, but people don't often see the little things, and it's the little things that sometimes are more stressful in having to deal with than the big things. So, as we talked, we were saying if we could perhaps adopt a neighborhood, go through a local church or a local community group and focus on just a small neighborhood and give them what they needed. So we'd be happy to work with you, try to set up a meeting, try to initiate something, and have Wareham maybe adopt a neighborhood and take care of that neighborhood for however long they need us.
Well, and as I said, I'll make myself available to you. One of the reasons why I asked for this to be put on the agenda was because I do feel that this is a community effort, and we as the Board of Selectmen are community leaders, and we all 5 of us and I speak for all five of us, are, very concerned about the tragedies that are being faced by those impacted by Hurricane Sandy. And I'm sure we've all gotten the phone calls from people asking, what they can do. People want to help. So let's organize it. Let's get it moving. We've got Hammond School. Maybe Mr. Sullivan could attend the first meeting and think about the feasibility of using Hammond School as the thing. That's Mrs. Begley's idea, by the way. I just give credit where credit's due. Feasibility of using Hammond School. We can make a list. I know I have some businesses that have already reached out to me and said we want to help. We'll be a collection point. We'll do what we can, and let's just tell me when and where. I keep in mind I have to work during the day, Tuesday and Wednesday, but
We'll be in touch, and we'll try to do what we can to help you and try to set something up.
thank you.
And Claire, if you give Janet a call,
Mm-hmm.
you work through Janet, right? She has all the emails.
Okay.
Right? She has that list of all the emails for the groups and the people in the committees and stuff. So
Okay.
she'll be able to pull
Be
that
happy to
together
do that.
pretty quick for you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's gonna take care of
I've
item
heard of
number
that New
9D.
Year's party somewhere. Were we in a parking lot? It was you, wasn't it? Put me down for 2.
No,
All right.
thank you.
Mr. White?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm gonna leave it right here because
you
otherwise
could have
it's
just
empty.
stayed there, right?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sharon and I appreciate the opportunity to come back and see you once in a while. And tonight we want to talk about the upcoming Veterans Day program that is sponsored by the Wareham Veterans Council. Consists of, this is going to be Monday the 12th. It'll consist of a parade starting at 10:30, a ceremony that will commence about 11 o'clock, and a luncheon for veterans and their families that will commence about noontime.
We're really doing well with people volunteering, so we're really happy with that. But if you're still interested in helping out for that 1 hour, please contact us. The luncheon seems to be going well. We're also asking if the Board of Selectmen wouldn't mind serving. So if you're available, we would love to have you serve the veterans. Last year we served approximately 220. We're hoping to do that and possibly more. So if you could put that on your agenda, we'd love to have you serve the vets. And we do have some veterans that are coming this year from the nursing home. They've haven't been able to participate, and we've made arrangements for them to participate this year. So we're getting new people involved, and we're really happy with that. So the outcome from the community's been wonderful.
10 o'clock, right?
10 o'clock is check-in. The parade's at 10:30.
Right.
The ceremony is immediately following the parade, and the luncheon right after that.
You put me down, right? I saw you did.
I've put you down everywhere I could fill in a blank with your name, Steve.
There you go.
If anyone wants to hear more discussion about this, Sharon and I will be on the Gumbo Show tomorrow at about 8:30 on Channel 9 on Comcast, and I guess it's 30 on Verizon. We won't take any more of your time tonight unless Sharon has other things she wanted to say.
You have a question?
Well, I believe we had a proclamation to read, did we not?
Yes.
It's just for the board to approve after.
Oh,
We're not giving it to anybody. That's for Monday.
oh, okay.
Yeah, the presentation for the proclamation is at the ceremony on Monday.
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Right.
I promise to have a program in your hands by the end of the week.
Well, and Savannah and I will both be there. Savannah says she'll serve food.
We're
I
looking
think
forward
she'll
to it.
probably be more entertainment than anything else, but
Okay. Thank you very
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a hearing at 7:15.
we have a hearing for Viniac Liquors, Inc., doing business as Anchor Liquors at 2360 Cranberry Highway for transfer of stock. New officer, director, and change of manager. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the hearing. Motion made and seconded. On the question, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, 500. Public hearing is now open.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm good. How you doing, sir?
Good. You got to talk right into it. Get real close. There you go.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, me and my brother-in-law, we bought couple business in 2010, and afterwards we decided to separate it. So he take care one place and I take care another. So now we decide to separate on a paper too. That's why we apply for change of manager. And stock and officers too.
Yeah. Questions from the board, Mr. Titlebaum?
Mr. Chair, this is a public hearing.
Yeah.
Can we,
He's part of the public. For someone, I don't know if he has any questions.
Well, I think what Clerk Winslow was suggesting, that perhaps we accept public input first, given it's a public
whatever
hearing.
you
And
want
then
to do. Anyone
and we-
here like to speak in favor or against this gentleman's request? Mr. Titlebaum.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Slavin? No questions. Mrs. Begley?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Winslow?
no questions.
Motion to close the hearing.
I move to close the hearing.
Motion made, seconded. On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500.
I move to approve the application by Vinayak, did I say that correctly?
Yeah, Vinayak.
Liquors, Inc., doing business as Anchor Liquors at 2360 Cranberry Highway for transfer of stock, new officer, director, and change of manager.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, 500.
Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you very much.
Thank
sir.
you.
Is anyone here from the Cremisa tribe, the Order of the Red Men?
Good evening, everyone.
Hang on 1 second. Hang on 1 second. We have to open this hearing to change the manager.
Is this a,
That's no different than the first one, I don't think. Rich, do we need a public hearing on the second one?
there was no advertisement.
No. Okay, sir?
Hi, my name is Richard Souza. I'm here to, for the change in management. The reason is our current manager's, his health is not very good, so I voluntarily stepped forward. I've been a member of the organization for over 30 years, and I have been a past manager for a total of 6 years, and I'm been a current officer for over 30 years, and I'm well familiar with the place.
Questions, Mr. Titlebaum?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Slavin? Mrs. Begley?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Winslow?
The only question I have,
Tips is attached.
it is?
Yes.
Okay, it must be over there. That's what I was looking for.
Attached to our packet.
Oh, okay, here it is. Okay, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
All set?
Nothing further. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the change of manager application from Cremisa Tribe number 156, Improved Order of Redmond.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, 500.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Congratulations, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Back, there's nothing on Westfield, the consent agenda.
First, we have the authorization to sign bills and documents. We have a bill from Blattman, Brabowski, and Mead LLC, invoice number 8262, dated October 22nd, 2012, in the amount of $15,000. I have a question on this bill. Are we being billed for an entire month? I thought that that law firm discontinued their services to us on October 23rd. It only goes till the 22nd, but how do we typically pay the bills? Do we pay them the 1st through the 30th, the 15th to the 15th? How does that typically run? Oh, sorry.
There we go. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to Ms. Winslow, this would be the last bill. It usually runs 19th to 19th, 20th to 20th, and so this would be the last Blattman bill.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the invoice by Blattman, Burbowski and Mead LLC, invoice number 8262, dated October 22nd, in the amount of $15,000.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
Okay, we have a number of minutes to approve. I move to approve the board's regular minutes dated 9/13/12.
I will second for a correction
Second for discussion.
or discussion. It's a correction, though. These minutes, Mrs. Winslow was absent, and I was clerk pro tem. And on page 3, under licenses and permits, the minutes reflect that Mrs. Winslow made a motion. And that should be Ellen Begley made a motion.
Okay, so I will withdraw my motion if you will kindly withdraw your second, Mrs. Begley, and I'll make a new motion with the...
motion on the table. Nobody seconded it.
I did.
Ellen seconded for
It's
discussion.
not recorded.
Okay.
She had a question.
Oh.
Go ahead and change it. And then
I move to approve the minutes of 9/13/2012 of the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen and SOAR Commissioners with the following change. Under item number 7, motion should reflect that Mrs. Begley moved as opposed to Mrs. Winslow.
Okay, I have a motion made.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question?
I was here for the 13th. I was not for the next meeting.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Oh,
opposed?
abstain. Sorry.
401.
I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of the Board of Selectmen and the SOAR Commissioners of September 18th, 2012.
We have a motion made. Second. Mr. Slavin. Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 401.
I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of the Board of Selectmen / SOAR Commissioners from September 24th, 2012.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 500. Next.
Next, we have the regular meeting minutes. I move to approve the regular meeting minutes from a meeting of the Board of Selectmen SOAR Commissioners from October 2nd, 2012.
Have a motion made.
Second.
Seconded. On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
I didn't get here till late, so I'm going to abstain.
401.
Mr. Chair, while we're under this regular minutes, it did come to our attention that a piece of litigation had been resolved. We do need a list of any executive session meeting minutes so that we can release anything that may have been resolved. What would the process for that be?
Rich, you want to handle that?
Oh, sure. Mr. Chairman, through you to Ms. Winslow, I think what you'd want to do would be to have all those minutes prepared, have myself and/or the town administrator go through them to ascertain whether the particular cases or matters in them had been resolved, and then either or both of us could report back to the board saying, yes, you can release these minutes in total, or I know in one case there's a public records request. Yes, you can release this portion of the minutes, but the other parts would have to be redacted. But for us to be able to do that, we'd actually have to be able to sit and read the minutes.
So, Mr. Chairman, is that something that we can get done?
Would be something that you would, as the clerk, you would make arrangements with council and town administrator to get it done.
Okay, but I thought that Attorney Bowen just said that him and Derek would sit down and...
Well, he needs to review them to make sure that they're appropriate to release.
Okay, so can Mr. Sullivan get those together so that Attorney Bowen can review them?
We would need copies of the minutes given to us on that to review. From the Board of
Yeah, you
Selectmen,
need
that's
to-
usually
Jason, you
done
just
to
need
who's
to go
doing
to
that.
Janet or Shirley, sit down with them, figure out what executive minutes there are there, and you can ask them to give them to Mr. Bowen. He
I'll,
can
s-
review
I'll
them.
send an email to them and ask them to
Thank
get
you.
those minutes. Thank you. Next, we have an appointment interview to the Plymouth Carver Aquifer Advisory Committee. We had one interview with a Mr. Brock Tucci. I believe we had one applicant withdraw. We have one voting delegate and one alternate. It's my understanding we're appointing the alternate because, and then we had another applicant who we have not yet interviewed, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, he is satisfied that there's somebody to do it. He doesn't need to do it.
Okay. So I'm not sure what the result of the appointed delegate was.
It's the conservation agent.
Okay, so I move to approve Dave Pichette as to the delegate to the Plymouth County Aquifer Advisory Committee to a term to expire no later than June 30th, 2013.
Have a motion made.
Second.
Second. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
I move to appoint Brock Tucci as the alternate to the Plymouth Carver Aquifer Advisory Committee to a term to expire no later than June 30th, 2013.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 401.
Mr. Chair, we will need the office to print us forms with the names on them for us to sign. We can't sign blank forms that it doesn't have a name on the appointment letters. We've already covered the licenses and permits. Now we have SOAR business. We have a number of abatements.
Guy, do you have any citizens on this?
Sorry?
This is your presentation, right?
Yes, as far as I know.
No citizens. If you don't mind, I'd like to move to the liquor. If you don't mind, you got somewhere to go?
I always have somebody to go, but no problem, Mr. Chair.
If you don't mind, I got a lot of people sitting here
I understand. Okay.
for a hearing. If it's going to be quick, fine.
I
But
think we can rip right through this.
okay, come on.
I really do, because I'm gonna pull a couple and
And we are set for next week. I
Yes,
got
Mike,
an email back from
yes,
Judici
that he would be here.
next week. They will be here.
yes, and
Okay. It's on
Shirley
the agenda.
wants to know the agenda, what Mike's got to present, so I emailed Mike and have him present to
Yeah.
us. I'll get it to you so you
It's
can
on
get
the
it to them.
agenda for next week.
Okay. Yes, okay.
Okay, so we're going to go down the list in order. We have a SOAR abatement for 184 Main Street.
I'd like to put that on hold.
We have a SOAR abatement for 56 Nanamit Street.
Yes, 56 Nanimous Street is an abatement. Pretty straightforward. We had already abated this gentleman. The account was never put on hold, so it generated another bill. So I want to abate that bill and put the other one. It's pretty straightforward. And we've done some internal things to eliminate this from happening again, but that's the one at 56 Nanimous Street.
Okay, so I move to approve the abatement request for account number 736227, 56 Nanamit Street, in the amount of $298 for the first half of FY 2013 SOAR usage bill.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Abstained? 500.
7 Parkwood Drive.
Yes, 7 Parkwood Drive. The building has actually been changed. It was a 2-family dwelling at one time, and if you look at the records, I think I included them in the packet from the assessors. You can see that it's been changed to 1 family, so they're entitled to an abatement of $49.67.
I move to approve the abatement for account number 792648, 7 Parkwood Drive, in the amount of $49.67 for 1 month, which would be July of the first half of the FY 2013 SOAR usage bill.
You have a motion made.
Oh, here it is.
Second.
Second question. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Abstained? 500.
And we have 171 Onset Avenue.
I'd like to put that on hold.
25, oh, then we have a SOAR connection for 2515 Cranberry Highway.
Yes, this has been granted in the past on the condition that he present a set of plans. He has since presented a set of plans, which I believe is in your packet. So we'd like to get approval to have him, or to authorize him to continue with his plans to tie in. A caveat is that it's a commercial piece of property, and our requirements are that he has a duplex pump, not a simplex. So I'm requiring he puts 2 pumps into the system, not 1. He's aware of that, and he agrees to that. So I told him I would move forward with it.
May I ask a question, or should I make a motion first?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Guy?
Yes.
So, will that be included in the motion? Is that the only difference that would be for this property, given that the plans you got were residential? So, if you got the commercial plans, that would be the only difference?
Yes, ma'am. That is what the difference, what he submitted to me. It's a simplex, I need a duplex, because it is commercial property.
And is it a different charge?
It does. Now it includes a $1,500 fee for my review of this, and a $250 fee from $200 from residential to commercial.
Okay.
And he's aware of the fees, so I think will be, absolutely, he's aware of the increase in the fees to him.
So, if the motion is made, it should be for commercial?
Yes, ma'am. His letter included that we had him write that it will be commercial. He's well aware of it, so the motion should be for commercial. I agree.
Thank you.
I move to approve the SOAR connection, the commercial SOAR connection for 2515 Cranberry Highway.
Motion made and seconded. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Mr. Chair, we also have on here a discussion regarding SOAR usage bill.
Right.
And this comes about as a letter, from a letter that we received on November 1st, which explains to us that the SOAR bills are coming out right at the same time as the tax bills come out, and that can be very difficult for people on fixed incomes.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I don't know. I know a couple of years ago we had a presentation by a company whose name escapes me at the moment, and we had talked about the whole SOAR billing issue as far as whether you bill EDU rate, whether you bill through usage, whether you have a hybrid system. It seems to me like it's a much bigger issue than just the date of the bills. We had somebody come in the office earlier today. We got an email about it, very upset over their SOAR bill.
EDU rate, yes, ma'am. And that's been an ongoing controversy, so it's something we need to address at a later date, whether we do a committee, forum, or whatever we do. This particular instance is just simply the timing of the billing. So the reason why I brought it to the board's attention, that they may want me or someone to look into the timing of the bill. That's simple. If there's a way to address it so they can get it a month later or a month earlier or whatever the case may be, that may satisfy folks on a fixed income that are very regulated, regimented in how they pay their bills by what they get in. So there was a simple suggestion that maybe we can look at it, maybe shift the date a month, and that'll alleviate some burden for the seniors. That was the whole intent of the letter. So if you would just say, yes, we can go ahead, I'll look into it, get you involved, and we can make some decisions as how we can address Mrs. Caldwell's concern about the timing of the bill. She doesn't have the money all at once for the 2 bills, and so she'd like to spread it out.
Well, it works for me. Why don't you look at it and write a policy up and
We can review it.
discuss it, review it, approve it?
See
Done.
if it.
How's that?
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me. Anybody else have a comment?
I have a little concern, Guy, because
Yes.
we're setting a precedent and stuff. Whatever you decide to do, I hope we'll go through town council just to make sure we don't do something that comes back at us.
Absolutely, I agree. Because some of the things that I looked at the bill is whether we bill before or after. Right now we bill after, so that'll be part of this discussion with the town attorney, town administrator, and then we can sit with the members of the board and go through it, vet through it, and figure out the best way to approach it.
Maybe
If in fact there is one way, I'm not sure.
Maybe through you and also through the town administrator, sit with John Foster, the treasurer, to see if there's a possibility of somehow in the bill that they get a 30-day delay, and we don't cause a problem that way either.
I agree if there's a way to just get, I think what you're saying, if she doesn't pay it on time, there's a penalty and all this good stuff, and so if it goes a day beyond 30 I don't know, so I have to, we'll include John into the discussion, so.
Thank you.
TA, yes, John. Okay.
Just, Mr. Chairman, what is the current bill issue date right now? I seem to recall receiving it 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I can't remember exactly when they went out. I noticed the November 8th due date put on the
They go
calendar,
out
but,
approximately August, September, then they go out again February, March.
okay.
And so the due date becomes due around tax time, so
Right.
I don't know if we can shift that. If we can get in the middle there some way, then it would be a good timing for the folks that have fixed incomes and concerns about paying the bill, so it's something worth looking at.
Yeah, but the tax bills, as you know, go out every 3 months. Well, the bills don't, but the payment is due every 3 months.
Yes.
August 1st, November 1st, February
February
1st, and May
1st and
1st. So
May
you're trying to
1st.
slot it in the middle of that 90-day
If
window,
we can,
I guess.
if
Yeah.
we can, I'd like to at least attempt to. If we can, if we can't, then we'll have to figure something else. But I'd like to attempt to,
Okay.
because I'm sure she's not alone, so
Right.
we can look at it. And again, the EDU, very, very great point, and something we should look at. I really think it's time, and maybe the board can put together a committee to really review this and see if it's something we can do, and with a series of meetings, and see if we can figure that out.
Well, Mr. Campina, here's my feeling on it. I think we should pick a Saturday morning and we should sit down and talk about it. It's been talked and committed to death.
Yes.
We got to do something about this. It's simply, it's becoming a real problem for some people, and I don't see why we've studied it, we've looked at the studies, we've seen the results. Who did that? Do you remember?
CDM did a report.
No. This was a different one.
Okay, Ty and Bond did a report. We got Ty and Bond, we got CDM, the two reports I've seen. I'm not sure which one you particularly are talking about, but we've had discussion and reports on this very issue. And part of the problem has been the implementation of it because of costs. When you implement it, there's going to be a certain amount of time where there's going to be no revenue, so that was a concern. And so they suggested that we increase EDU for a short period of time and then bankroll that money. One of the concerns. So there's a bunch of them, but we can bring them all back up to the table and discuss them, as you say, and then get good direction and make a decision as to what's the best way to approach it.
Mr. Chairman, can we get a workshop on a Saturday morning following the new
You really need
year?
to have a big workshop for this?
Yeah,
He's here every week.
but I think this is a big issue.
Well, if you'd like to have a workshop and don't put it off, that's fine.
Well, I
Whatever
don't
you
want
like
to put
do,
it
Mr.
off,
Chair,
but I think
I will.
I
That's why
understand.
he's here first.
I'm talking about changing the entire structure of how
Oh.
we bill the sewer.
Oh. No, that'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you check with the people who need to be there?
After the first of the year, because with the holidays coming, people have a lot of
Oh.
commitments. I don't want anybody to make sure everybody's available.
If you could check with the folks you need, Guy,
Yes.
and just get a list of dates, send it back, we'll set it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One point, Mr. Chair, on this. Guy, if we're gonna go ahead and do this, if there's some way through the town administrator helping you, we need to get some financial reports. We need to know what profit and loss is. If we're gonna change the system of how we bill and percentages and stuff, we really need to know what the numbers are for real.
Okay.
We've been working basically with a pie in the sky number.
Okay, I'll talk to the town administrator, get a date with him, and we'll sit down and we'll look at things that we have to look at.
Just make sure everybody that needs
To be there
to
is
be
there.
there is available.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it becomes a waste of time.
Okay.
All right, any other sewer business?
Update on Apple Street.
It's still there. No,
All
I'm
right.
sorry. The issue of Apple Street, there was a puddle there that dissipates, and I think one of the residents were concerned about the puddle. So I've been there myself. It dissipates. Mr. Gifford's been there. It dissipates. We don't see at this time any great concern. There's some others that we're looking at that have puddle problems that we're looking at to resolve, and that's 10 Cherry, the one on Avenue A, and then there's a piece of property on Washburn. But those are the ones that we're looking at to resolve. And this particular one here, we feel it's not an issue because it doesn't hold water. It puddles during the rainstorm, then it goes away.
What about the other group?
I'm sorry?
I kind of got this mixed up with the guy that was here the other night. The guy that was here the other night said the road is...
Oh, that's on Cremisa. Oh, yeah, we looked at that. That's going to be corrected. What happens is that it's also going to be corrected when we do in the road. There's a pit, if you will, for this collection of sewer. So when they graded it, instead of bringing it crowning it, bringing everything down and forcing it to the side. They crown everything to the middle to our wet well. That has to be corrected. And when they did that, it goes straight down the road, so it bypasses and waves to the catch basins that's going by. So we're going to regrade that. We're going to change the pitch so it's forced to the catch basins and away from. So that's
Who's going to regrade that?
it's CDM is. Good question. CDM is going to have it done. I'm not so sure who their contract is going to be. I can't assume it's going to be Geosio because they haven't agreed to it. But CDM acknowledges that it's a problem. They oversaw the job. So it'll be CDM's responsibility to figure out who's going to grade it and make it correct.
Financial responsibility.
It's not going to be it's not our financial responsibility.
Well, that was the point.
Yes, it's not our financial responsibility. It's
You and I are on the
we've
same
already paid
page
for
there.
it. We already paid for it, and if
Right.
it was done incorrect, we're not paying again.
Okay. Any other sub business? Thank you, Mr. Campino.
I have a question.
Yes.
When is CDM coming?
Next week.
Next week.
Next week. So is that when we're going to discuss all the issues that remain unresolved for contract 2?
It's on
Yes,
the
ma'am.
agenda for next week.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Yes. I got you at 12:30, so we'll go after that. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we have a public hearing regarding the liquor
Yeah.
license.
Hey, Guy, hang on one second. Will you do me a favor?
Yes.
Is there anybody here that did not get a copy of the regulations when you came in? Raise your hand. Mr. Campino will be happy to give you one. Thank you.
I'd like to move to open the public hearing regarding the draft liquor license regulations.
Second.
Did he bypass you, ma'am? Oh, okay. I have a motion made and second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Good evening and thank you for coming. One of the objectives this year of the board is to review all of our policies and procedures. So the first group that we attacked was the liquor policies, and I think most of you either got an email or a letter with a link to the website and the file. What you'll see up on the screen is the same thing that you have in your hand. Mr. Bowen will walk through each of, this is meant to be interactive, so that Mr. Bowen will walk through the regulations that we're about to enact. And if you have any questions along the way, this is kind of meant to, just feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. Mr. Bowen? And again, I'm trusting you to keep it short.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
You're
members of
welcome.
the board. Chairman has mentioned brevity several times, so I'll endeavor to honor that request. The town
Everybody here?
I'll
Okay.
I'll move this a little
If
closer.
you need to move forward to the front, we have another table over here. If you have an issue seeing, feel free to come up.
The idea behind this was just to pull together all the liquor regulations into one document rather than what we have now, which is a series of documents that have grown up over time. So what I'll do is I'll just go through page by page and just try to give you a general idea of what's happening on each page. If you have a question, please stop me and I'd be happy to attempt an answer. Starting with page 2, which is what is up on the screen, probably the most important part there is in the introduction where it says, in issuing regulations, the Board of Selectmen, as the liquor licensing authority of the town of Wareham, is setting forth the expectations of the citizens of Wareham. So in other words, these regulations will constitute an enforceable set of expectations by the Board of Selectmen acting on behalf of the citizens of the town. And so it would behoove every license holder to be well aware of each of the conditions. Moving along down the page towards the bottom are basic definitions, which are probably familiar to all of you in the liquor industry. On page 3, there are a couple of important points that I just want to draw to your attention. In section 101A, it provides that all licensees, that's you, of the licensing authority shall ensure that a copy of the rules and regulations is kept on premises at all times. So in other words, it will not be an excuse for a licensed establishment to say, well, we didn't know about the regulations. The regulations say that you have to have a copy on hand. And moreover, when you go down to 101B, it provides that all the employees, or you as the license holder, are responsible for having all of your employees read the regulations so that they know what's expected of them. And it's important for you to follow through on that, because if there were ever an unfortunate incident, by virtue of this regulation, it would not be a legitimate defense for you to say, well, my employee didn't know about the regulations. The regulations say you have to have them read them. Moving along, Section 102, posting and signs. The first two, A and B, those basically are a recitation of the state law. When you get to C, you're coming to the first of a bunch of what I would call anti-discrimination clauses. On this one, you have to have advanced posting of any dress code or preferred customer program or cover charge. I'm not saying this has ever happened in Wareham. In my time, it never has, but there have been communities where establishments have decided that they didn't want certain people coming into their establishments, and all of a sudden, mysterious dress code, mysterious cover charge requirements appeared at the last minute when somebody they didn't like showed up. You can't do that. It's all got to be, if you're going to have those types of things, they have to be posted and decided on in advance, because these regulations make it clear we're not putting up with any kind of discrimination. On page 4, you again have a whole series of what I would consider no discrimination clauses. In A, you're not going to get away with, and I don't mean you personally, it's just this happens in other communities. No license holder is going to get away with discriminating on the basis of race, color, religious creed, national origin, sex, ancestry, physical or mental disability. Just not going to happen. And these regulations make it very clear that that is the official policy of the town of Wareham. When you drop down to B, on page 4, 103B, it deals with dress codes. Again, this is a no discrimination type of provision. If you're going to have a dress code, it has to be posted in advance. If you want people wearing jackets and ties or tuxedos and top hats, that sign's got to be there. So that if, for example, I have to happen to show up at the door and you don't like the look of me and you say, hey, Rich, you're not wearing your white tie and tails, you can't come in, I'll say, oh, yes, I can. It's not posted. It's anti-discrimination. Dropping down to C, again, another no discrimination clause. This deals with situations in other communities which we wouldn't tolerate here, that deal with issuing special passes and preferential admissions. You see it sometimes in establishments in other communities when there are lines and all of a sudden people mysteriously breeze past the line and get inside. You may issue special passes, but you better have a policy in place to handle that at the establishment, including a list of all the pass holders, so that if, I hate to put it this way, so if the pretty blonde shows up and gets whisked by the line because she, quote unquote, has a special pass, well, her name better be on the special pass list that you have to keep inside. Drop down to D, this deals with minimum cover charges. If you're going to have a minimum cover charge, you better post it. And this gets into tax issues. If you're going to collect admission fees, you have to issue each admittee with a ticket. Not just a ticket, but a numbered ticket. And you have to keep a record of the numbers of tickets so that when our friends from the Department of Revenue come by and examine your books, there is some connection between the entrance fees that were paid and some legitimate tax record that they can look at. Dropping down to the bottom of page 5, and this is to section I, subsection 1 and 2, these are public safety requirements. Persons who wait inside the premises shall be kept in an orderly line and must not be permitted to block fire aisles or exits. The number of persons waiting inside the premises shall not exceed the number of persons allowed as standees. We are acknowledging that we are not going to allow license holders to break fire codes, and that's what this is designed to present. Number two, persons who are permitted to wait in line outside the premises shall be supervised by an employee of the licensed premises. Such employee shall stand outside with the line during all times when the line exceeds 10 persons, and shall announce no further admissions to the premises. Will be allowed basically until some people come out. The reason for that is it's to protect our neighborhoods. People waiting in line to get into an establishment are out for a good time. That's desirable thing, but we just don't want them to become disorderly or boisterous or a nuisance to the neighbors. Dropping down to K, which is about a third of the way down, this deals with premises control. Once the establishment is closed, patrons can't hang out. You can't invite people in to have drinks. It's closed, done. And we have, not recently, but I can remember conducting a hearing. I can even see the board members, but I'll just say about 15 years ago where we dealt with this very situation where it was after 2 a.m., there were drinks on the table, there were patrons inside drinking. No can do. When the closing time comes, unless you're an employee pursuing legitimate business, for example, cleaning up, preparing for food for the next day's business, patrons, gone. Do yourself a favor. It's a problem when it happens. One of the most significant changes, I think, in the regulations is in 104A. And this deals with hours of operation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to jump over to page 16 to section 1.16, which is also an hours of regulation situation. Here's what 104A says. The hours of operation shall be restricted to those set by the licensing authority and stated on the face of the license. Your license, which you must have up on the wall, has the hours. That's your ticket to operate. Now, this is a seasonal community. Frankly, it's not profitable for many businesses during the off-season to remain open to the maximum number of hours that are authorized under the license. I think there's a recognition of that economic reality, but at the same time, from a public safety point of view, the licensing board and its agents, the police department, have to know what's going on. For example, if there's a light on in your business or people milling around, it's important to know, for the police department as your agents, for the licensing authority to know what's going on. So what we have here is, notwithstanding the foregoing, a licensee may, upon prior telephonic notice to the Wareham Police Department recorded line and a telephone call and message to the selectmen staff, close up to 3 hours earlier than the hour of closing posted on the license. If you think that under this regulation, if adopted, if you think that you're going to have a dead night, call the police, call the Board of Selectmen, give the appropriate notifications and say, our license says we can be open till midnight. There's no business. We're closing shop at 9 o'clock. That's all it says that you have to do. Now, this is where I want you to swing over to page 16, if you will. And if you drop down to 1.16, permission to close premises required, this deals with a slightly different issue. The one I just discussed is it's a slow night, or you're going to have a slow week, or you're in a slow period and you're going to make those phone calls. This deals with the situation where you're going to be closed for a protracted period of time for whatever reason. It could be renovation, it could be illness, it could be other issues. Here's what it says under A. Any licensee intending to close a place of business, whether on a temporary or permanent basis, must notify the licensing authority, that's these guys up here, in writing before such closing, stating the reason and length of such closing, and obtain approval. So in other words, you know, if I'm going to do a wonderful renovation of my premises and it's going to take a month, in advance, before I close the doors to business, I have to ask this board for permission in writing. This board will schedule an agenda item, and it will vote on whether to approve your request. And please understand that the Board of Selectmen as licensing authority would have the discretion to disapprove that request. So, you know, you want to be very punctilious in the way that you handle it. Now, this is very different from that other situation over in 1.04, where you have a few days or a day where you want to close up early and you make a phone call. That is a more generous standard. That is designed to apply for really just kind of transient sort of things. This deals with situations where you are going to be closed for a while. And the regulation goes on to say, failure to provide such notice may result in disciplinary action against the license holder. You could get your license suspended. I suppose it would be convenient to have it suspended for the period in which you wanted to close. My guess is that's probably not how it would work. The suspension, I'm guessing, would probably happen when you would most want to be open. So, you know, don't try to game it. And then when you go down to B, it says the restriction in A shall not apply to a closing due to an act of God, natural disaster, illness, or some other business problem for which request has been made to the authority and approval granted. So those are, I guess the legal phrase, are disjunctive things. You know, if your roof gets blown away, you get a flood, you get pipes broken, some act of God, of course you're not going to open up. You're not in a fit state to open up. And so you will be forgiven. Although my advice is that if you find yourself in that situation, inform the licensing authority, inform the board so they know what's going on, inform the police so they know what's going on. So that...
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Rich, there's
Yes,
a
ma'am.
gentleman that has a question in the back.
Oh, thank you, Mr.
Yeah, Richard Souza from Revenue. How does this affect by the club closing early? We have to find hours. However, we normally, you know, we have meetings and stuff like that. We're not open every night till 11, 12 o'clock at night. So, you know, we typically go home at certain times. Now, club licenses affected. Can you talk on that? How it affects the first is the all alcohol non-club license.
Oh, with your permission, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. You know, these regulations, in large part, do not distinguish between clubs that hold liquor licenses and restaurants or taverns or package stores or anything like that. If you serve liquor, you would be subject to these regulations. What you're really talking about is operating your facility in a manner that best befits your clientele. Now, if it's your regular practice, say, to close, you know, say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are very slow nights, and there's no need to, you know, be hanging around, you might want to consider going to the Board of Selectmen and just asking to have the hours on your license changed to reflect the fact that, I don't know what you have now, what, a 1 a.m. license? Okay, yeah, I mean, so, you know, maybe you don't need a 1 a.m. license for certain days of the week. So perhaps it would be in your interest to come in and ask to have the license modified in a way that reflects the way that you really operate. Now, on the other hand, there may be occasions when you know, maybe in the summer it gets livelier on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night than it does on a 30-degree night in November or December. So maybe you handle that as a situation where if you are occasionally closing up to 3 hours early, as Section 1.04 talks about, maybe you make the phone call to the selectman's office, to the police department saying, hey, you know, it's dead. We've got a 1 a.m. license. We're closing up at 10. That's your notification. Under these regulations, that's the way that you would handle it.
That would mean a phone call pretty much every night, because we're normally open pretty much during the weekend, so, and I don't know about the other clubs in town, but, you know, we just have a meeting night, and the ladies come in on another night, and we're open on the weekends most of the time, Friday, night, Saturday, Sunday, 11 do during the Christmas season, have somebody come in, like on a Tuesday night or something like that. So this is a lot of transitional back and forth to the selectmen and the town police, so, I don't know, if we need to be on the phone every day.
Well, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, maybe what I'd suggest in those cases is that really what you're talking about is a closing under section 1.16, where you're intending to close a place of business on a permanent basis. Now, there's closing and closing. By closing, that doesn't mean coming down and putting a big chain around the building and saying, hey, we're closed. That could also incorporate a situation where you would come into the Board of Selectmen and say, members of the board, from November 1st through June 1st, we want permission to close at, pick a time. I'll just say 8 o'clock. I don't know what the time would be. We want permission to close at 8 o'clock on Monday through Thursday for that time period, so that you're not calling every night. I think that's a sort of a decision that you'd have to make as to how you'd want to handle it. But that would be one way I think that you could handle it. Now I'm going to jump back to we left off on page 6 because I jumped ahead, because this hours of closing thing I think was one of the big things that we were really trying to work with.
Now, Rich,
oh, yes, sir.
as I'm reading through that, let's say, especially in the winter, in the summertime I do a very busy lunch hour. So I open at 11, right? But in the winter, right now, I have no lunch crowd. So maybe I open at 3 hours later. But could we add a couple of words in there that say opening or closing?
Sure.
Where it says, where is it? The telephone, 3 hours. Will that cover folks who sit around from 11 to 2 doing nothing as well?
I think, with your permission,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, what I might do is I'll take. Was it Mr. Souza? Yes, sir. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll reflect on Mr. Souza's comments and your suggestion, and maybe I can come up with some language that maybe makes it a little bit clearer for the lunch crowd, as you suggest, the situation Mr. Souza is suggesting. Maybe we call that permission to close seasonally, or I think I just need to chew it over a little bit, but I understand the issue.
Yeah, especially where it says, 2 3 hours, either opening later or closing earlier, right? Because we do have several locations in town, and right now they're open in the morning, for lunch, and there's no lunch crowd.
Yeah.
So why should they bother? Why even bother? It doesn't make sense to run the place and have staff working there, and there's no customers till the afternoon.
Yeah, it's tough for business, and
but this only addresses closing.
Yes, and you know what I'll do is I'll massage it to try to cover that situation. The important philosophical point to be made is, when you grant hours of operation, the Board of Selectmen has the discretion to allow a licensed establishment to operate for less than those hours of operation. The name of the game here, if I can put it that way, under the Liquor Control Act, is that these licenses are issued to serve the public need, and you, as the licensing authority, are the people who are the determinators, if that's a word, of the public need. And if you determine that, in the middle of January, it makes no sense for somebody to be open for lunch or late, or Mr. Souza's situation, you've got the complete authority to do that. The ABCC acknowledges that. So, you've got a lot of power to adjust for our conditions.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I might, since we're on the subject of opening, Mr. Bowen, I noticed that, because I looked at this, we've had a few situations here about people wanting to open when it's not reflected on their license. Because a holiday falls on a day that, say, for example, someone wanted to be open only on Sundays, but wanted to be open for Valentine's Day that was a Monday. Is there any way to put something in here? Because that's been a really contentious issue in this last year. So if we could have something like that in there, and if we could just have language just to be specific, so no pun intended, everybody's on the same page. We have here the calendar year for legal holidays and dates of observance for pouring establishments and liquor licenses, liquor stores. So if we could kind of just put the language without, of course, the year, that the ABCC calendar year legal holidays and days of observance, we're going to follow those to the letter as well. But the opening has been really a contentious issue, as you know. You've been here for several of them.
Yes.
And the only other thing that I would bring up, because I see you jumped over to page 16 for the permission to close premises. Should we have any language in here, or, and this has been a question I've had for some time, if an establishment closes, what happens to the liquor license?
Oh, well, if an establishment closes, with or without your permission, I guess that would be the
Doesn't
question.
matter.
I would say if they close with your permission, you've allowed them to close, nothing happens to their liquor license. If, on the other hand, they close without your permission, that constitutes a cessation of business. And if the board so chooses, the board can take disciplinary action against a business that ceases to conduct business. Again, it's something that's discretionary with you. The phrase commonly is pocket license. Different boards across the Commonwealth have different levels of tolerance for pocket licenses. So I guess the answer would be, it would be up to you as to what you wanted to do. If you saw somebody who had a pocket license for a couple of months, hadn't talked to you about it, hadn't gotten permission, you could mark up a hearing, bring them in, and issue whatever penalty that you thought was appropriate, and of course we'd have to talk about what would be sustainable with the ABCC. If you didn't want to do that, I'm not going to suggest whether that's a good or a bad thing, but you could decide to do nothing. So I think that's kind of the way it shakes out.
But should there be some sort of language so that someone that has a business can kind of look and see what their obligation is? Because it's not spelled out here. And I think that, for me, the purpose of having regulations at all are for boundaries for us and for the people that are utilizing these licenses, so that everybody knows what's happening. So if we could have some of that language in here too, that I think it would be helpful for boards of selectmen and business owners.
Yeah, I'll try to punch this up. The way I had tried to address it was in 116A. Any licensee intending to close a place of business, whether on a temporary or permanent basis, must notify the licensing authority in writing before such closing, stating the reason and length of such closing, and obtain approval. Failure to provide such notice may result in disciplinary action against the license holder.
Would must be better as shall?
I can add, that would probably be better.
Okay. So you'll embellish that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along.
Stronger word. So we were back on 6. And Mr. Chairman, just to let you know where I'm at on this, that was probably the heart of some of the changes, so the rest of this will probably go quicker.
Right.
On 6, we dealt with hours of operation in A. On 104C at the bottom of page 6, the ABCC will tell you that you can't punish a license holder for disorderly activities that occur outside the described licensed premises. And the described licensed premises is typically that building envelope where liquor is served, and not the parking areas, walkways, and so forth outside. The way that you extend your jurisdiction outside the actual building envelope is through 104C. The licensee shall ensure that their patrons leave the premises in an orderly manner. Licensees who have a clientele that regularly fails to leave the area in a quiet and orderly manner should hire security personnel. It says to police. I'll have to fix that. Oh, to police the leave taking of the patrons at closing time. So through regulation, what is being done here is it's expanding your jurisdiction to the outside to protect the neighborhoods. On the top of 7, the only one I'll touch on is 105A. When someone applies for a liquor license, they fill out an application. They describe what the licensed area is going to be. In other words, that's where the alcohol will be served, where it will be stored, where food will be eaten, and so forth. License holders should be aware under this regulation that if they make changes in the layout without consulting with you, that they are in violation of this regulation. I think it's only fair that if the interior layout is going to change, that they come back to you for permission, because changes in interior layout can cause changes in exterior noise and exterior activities. So if you're going to redecorate and move things around, have to present a plan to the board and get it changed. Dropping down to 106A, we're getting into things that are in some measure covered by state law, but this sort of elaborates them a little bit. When Prohibition was repealed, and I know Steve's getting nervous because I'm going back to ancient history, the big thing behind Prohibition, the repeal of Prohibition and the Liquor Control Act, was to make sure that unsavory people who had formerly been in the liquor business prior to the repeal of Prohibition did not find their way back into the business. I can tell you, and I see Selectman Slavin laughing, he knows that in not every case did that happen. But nonetheless, the law provides that when somebody comes in and applies for a liquor license, they have to identify who all their business partners are, where the money's coming from. In other words, no sleeping partners, no silent partners, no manufactured partners created by virtue of debts owed. And all of Section 106 gets into the question, or gets into the issue of requiring license holders to reveal all of their business partners and identify where all their investors are coming from. That's what that's about. Moving along over to Section 107 on page 9. All of 107 from page 9 through the middle of page 11 is designed to prevent people from becoming intoxicated. No free drinks, no happy hours, and these are in some measure already reflected in the state laws and ABCC regulations. These go a bit further, but this is designed to make sure that it's fine. You come in, you have your drink, you go at a reasonable pace, you control yourself, not here's a pitcher of margaritas and here's another one for free. Those days, for good or ill, are gone. Over on page 11, I'd like to draw your attention to 108C. I mentioned earlier about how right now we only have power to control what happens within the envelope of the building, the licensed area. In C, what we are trying to do is, again, increase our ability to regulate the exterior, which we would not otherwise be able to do without regulations. They must ask loiterers to disperse, notify the police, hire a security guard if necessary, maintain order, and so forth. It's all set out, but the idea is to allow us to address situations, especially situations where businesses are located in close proximity to residential areas, to be able to properly monitor what happens outside. Page 12, Section 109. This is something of an elaboration on state law. Chapter 138, Section 63 and 63A are a remarkable pair of statutes that actually allow the licensing agents for this board to conduct warrantless searches of licensed establishments. And the reason why you can do a warrantless search is because a license is a privilege, and if you accept the privilege, you accept the condition of a warrantless search that goes along with this. This goes along with those sections of the law which are constitutional and have been challenged. The license holders can't hinder or delay our agents, which I believe are the police department, must maintain lists of employees, no electronic signaling devices. For example, somebody, I've done cases where not in Wareham, where a bartender would have a button under the counter, he'd press it, and an alarm would go off in the back room. Cheese it, boys, it's the cops. And all of a sudden the card games and the one-armed bandits into there and everything got shut down and covered up. You can't do that. That place lost its license. On page 13, I'm sorry, this is 1.11, illegal activity on the licensed premises. This is all designed to require the license holder to keep an eye open for potential crime. Years ago, I did a case in the appeals court called Rum Runners versus the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission. And that was a case where there was drug dealing going on in the premises. And that establishment on Cape Cod lost its liquor license for an entire summer, which put it out of business because the bartender was turning a blind eye to cocaine trafficking that was going on in the licensed establishment. This comes out of the Rum Runners experience, and it puts a heavier obligation on people who run the businesses. You must frequently monitor the restrooms and non-public areas for signs of drug activity. Well, in that particular establishment, you could see the residue of the white lines on the lids of the backs of the toilets. People were doing lines of coke on tops of the toilets. I mean, the stuff was still there. I mean, you could have seen that. I won't get into some of the other things, but if you're going to be in the business, if you see something that looks odd, you have an obligation to keep your eye on it, and you should call the police and just say, hey, look, there's some weird stuff going on here, will you help us out? Jumping ahead to page 15, section 1.14, sentencing guidelines. These are very similar to what you have right now. First offense, warning to 7 days. Second offense, warning to 30 days. Third offense, warning to revocation. Only offenses that have occurred within 2 years preceding the date of the violation shall be used in calculating the number of offenses. The ABCC is going to require that. We don't punish for punishment's sake. It's not Marquis de Sade. We're not doing it for pleasure. Punishment is designed to have an educational component, and if you've managed to get by a couple years, well, that shows that you learned something and the clock gets reset. The guidelines are only a guide. Some of us, I guess I can call myself an old-timer. Some of us old-timers remember the tragic incident of Big Dan's over in New Bedford years, now probably going back about 25 years ago, in which a horrendous act occurred on a pool table in that establishment. That particular establishment, that was its first offense. Now, I would not want anyone to read this warning to 7-day suspension to think that what happened, if anything, God forbid, like that ever happened here, that it would be a warning to 7 days. This is a guideline, and if the facts warrant it, you can throw the guideline out and throw the book at them. At the very end on page 17, there's a section on service training. I'll just sum up and say, get it. And Mr. Chairman, that's the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowen. Are there any questions, sir?
Yes, I don't want to sound redundant, but we have different facilities, so we have different things in there. We have taverns, restaurants, and organizational clubs. Now, my understanding of a club license is the operating hours that we can provide it. However, as I mentioned before, that's the distinction between a club license and I think they call it all alcohol or whatever it is license, which is a lot more expensive than the club. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we don't provide people coming in the neighborhood or from out of town any alcohol because it's a kind of private club. It's a club. So this should be written a little more better to provide for the different facilities in town, the taverns, the restaurants, and the clubs. Because we're not open, we don't provide booze, we don't provide alcohol for people passing through. So this is very vague, but I understand, Mr. Bowen, you said you're going to go back and work on that.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Souza had particular written comments that he wanted to give that I could review to help me in this, I will be in on Thursday. I'd be happy to go through them and try to work with them to improve these regulations. I mean, that's why we have the hearing, to make them as good as we can.
Thank you. I will provide.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Anything you think we missed that might help to make your businesses a little easier to run? That's kind of the purpose, so that we're all on the same page. All right, next steps.
Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is I'll take the comments that were offered by the board. I'll get Mr. Souza's comments. I will try to come up, I will come up with a new draft reflecting those changes in the document, get it back to you for your review. And at that point, you could mark it up and decide whether you wanted to adopt them or not.
Okay, would we have to have another public hearing when you make
No, sir.
those changes? Okay.
Once you recess this public hearing.
And then what we'll do at that point is make sure that everybody gets the written copies so that you can put it up on your, have it in the establishment, and make sure that the employees are have read them and they're there. Any other comments? Okay.
Thank you for your work in preparing this.
Oh,
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Thanks, dear.
Motion made and seconded. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400. Thank you all very much for your patience.
Can you just note that Mrs. Begley is absent from the room at the moment?
Okay. You want to read this Veterans Day proclamation into the record?
I thought we were just voting to accept it.
Well, it'd be nice if you read it, I think,
Oh.
so it's in the record.
I move to accept the following Veterans Day proclamation. Whereas the 11th of November 1918 marked the end of the war to end all wars and the cessation of the most destructive... Oh, there's a word I am not quite sure how to say. Sanguinary and far-reaching war in human annals and the resumption by the people of the United States of peaceful relations with other nations, which we hope may never again be severed. And whereas veterans from Wareham have served our country with a distinction of honor and valor, and whereas it is fitting that the recurring anniversary of this date should be commemorated with thanksgiving and prayer and exercises designed to perpetuate peace through goodwill and mutual understanding between nations. And whereas veterans from Wareham are among those distinguished by their unyielding dedication, devotion to duty, and potentially the ultimate sacrifice, their lives. And whereas since 1954, when Armistice Day was designed henceforth to be known as Veterans Day, to honor all who had served in all wars, to preserve world peace, and whereas President Dwight D. Eisenhower issued the first Veterans Day proclamation on June 1st, 1954, and whereas to protect the nation they love, our veterans stepped forward when America needed them most. In conflicts around the world, their sacrifice and resolve helped destroy the enemies of freedom and saved millions from oppression. In answering history's call with honor, decency, and resolve, our veterans have shown the power of liberty and earned the respect and admiration of a grateful nation. And whereas all of America's veterans have placed our nation's security before their own lives, creating a debt that we can never fully repay. Our veterans represent the best of America, and they deserve the best America can give them. Therefore, we, the Wareham Board of Selectmen, do hereby proclaim November 12th, 2012 as Veterans Day in Wareham, and urge all citizens of Wareham to recognize the valor and sacrifice of our veterans through ceremonies and prayers. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands this 6th day of November 2012. Stephen M. Holmes, Chairman, Kara A. Winslow, Clerk, Ellen M. Bagley, Alan H. Slavin, and Peter W. Teitelbaum.
Motion made. Second. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstain. 500. Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, could you make sure that, that this is done and in the mailroom by Friday? Last year, we had to search all over creation to find the plaque. You just put it in the mailroom. Make sure it gets there by Friday. All right, and then I can just pick it up on Monday. Thank you. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, next up, we have any other town business not reasonably anticipated.
Town business?
Nope.
Mr. Sullivan?
Town administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
The first thing, it was with speaking on Hurricane Sandy, I would really be remiss if I didn't thank, you know, our staff and the first responders, our officials who worked tirelessly in preparation, then during the storm and after, on behalf of the town. I asked some of the departments if they had anybody in particular that really stood out, and the best way to put it was like the 2001 Patriots. They came out as a team, they knew what they had to do, and they did their job, so we really appreciated that. So we can't say enough on that. And the next night with the microburst, they were all over it as well, so great job to all of them. The next thing is sort of a lighter note. We did have our first Halloween decorating contest with our departments, and the assessing department were the big winners on there. A jar with brains was what threw them over the top. So.
Oh, the things we could say.
They probably were already. It's good news here. We do have the financials for July, August, and September. So the first 3 months for the revenues and expenditures that I'll be handing out to the board. I don't expect to review it right now. This is something for a further meeting so that you have at least the information ahead of time and you can study it. So I'm going to pass these out now. And I would say with it being such a short night, I will stop there.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank Mr. Sullivan for getting us numbers. It's been a long time, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a long run of knowing what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I haven't seen this, but which format what's included?
This is the, what you'd see is on the first part of it, you'll have the original budget for the expenditure ones.
Yeah.
Then you'll have budget revisions and a revised budget. This does not have fall town meetings revisions in there because it's through September. It wouldn't have the October in there. Then the next section you'll see are the year-to-date expenditures. Then they'll bring you over to the unobligated balances, and it'll give you the percent expended year-to-date, and then what you would expect to expend at year-to-date. So roughly it should be at 25%. You also have a memo attached where a lot of times at the beginning of the fiscal year, you have most of your expenditures because that's when the contracts are renewed. So this is just trying to explain any of the variances. If some department was at 31% instead of 25 or higher than that, those are the ones I concentrated on giving you the information.
But you would expect to see Buckminster very high because his summer's over.
Exactly. That'd be, and then with the revenue report, what we put on there was what the original budget is, where we are year to date in fiscal 13, that percent budget, and then the same period in fiscal 12. So you have something to compare it against on there, and try and give a percentage wise on that. And they're really on the revenue. It's tough because it can depend on whether one of the due dates falls within a month or isn't on there. So it's not always the best way to do it with a year-to-year comparison, but it gives you something to compare on there.
Has the finance committee gotten this?
They will get, receive it first, and they're receiving it.
You're gonna make sure they get it?
Yes.
Do they have a meeting tomorrow night?
No,
Say
they don't.
what?
No,
I just asked if they had a meeting tomorrow night, and they do not.
Oh, the finance committee.
no, they don't.
Mr. Chair, we would now be at liaison reports.
Could I just ask Mr. Sullivan a question before we move on?
Sure.
Couple questions. Without going into any detail, I believe we have the TA position on next week's agenda, Mr. Chair, is that true?
Yep.
Without going into any detail, or you can if you want, have you had any discussions with the DOR as to our status for setting the tax rate?
Yes, we have had a call with the DOR on there, something that stemmed back from a few weeks ago. I was out for a few days when they called. Before that, I had called them, so we finally connected on there. And again, we all knew that there was a November 1st deadline. That was some of the things we discussed. The big thing is tomorrow we'll have Powers and Sullivan in, our auditors.
Oh,
will be-
tomorrow, not the 14th, I thought it was the 14th.
Tomorrow, we're having them in as a preliminary for that. Our expectations are they'll be working on the 12th. That is Veterans Day, but they float a day in their department. So have them working off-site on the 12th and in here on the 14th, which is their original schedule for this year. So that's some good news there.
So, they've kind of extended our deadline. Begrudgingly, I'm sure.
I wouldn't say
They weren't excited about it, but
Yeah, there's.
understand it.
Yeah.
Now, as an offshoot to that, without getting into any details, because I'm certainly not gonna interfere, on a day-to-day basis, but have you posted the position of town accountant?
We have not at this point. The plan is to post that immediately. We have just to let everybody know what's been going on, we did promote the assistant town accountant to the accountant position, working with full-time hours of 40 hours there. And we've brought some additional staff working on to make sure that we're moving in the right direction on this.
All right, just because there's rumors abound, and I like to kind of go at something directly. Thank you, Mr.
If the question is
Sullivan.
that we had a plan, we did have a plan and do.
So I knew you had a plan, but not everybody knew you had a
No,
plan.
I
so-
appreciate that.
I believe that brings us up to liaison reports. We could start with Mr. Titlebaum.
None.
Mr. Slavin.
Planning board, as we all know, has been meeting with the Board of Selectmen. Those who don't know, from the TDRs, we basically finished our meeting on Monday. It's televised as well. The planning board will go forward for a TDR proposal. Probably will come before town meeting in the fall of next year.
Mrs. Begley.
I've already mentioned the public hearing, and for those that have gone down Indian Neck, I believe, is that where the Red Pines? I've seen the equipment in there. Mr. Titlebaum goes by there much more frequently than I do, but I've seen that quite a number of them have come down.
Yeah, quite a number of them have come down. I saw Minot Forest Committee Chairman Dunham in here earlier, but she's not here now. My understanding is that we're looking to get the logger back in there. One of the interesting things about the delays in the process, from what was hoped to have been accomplished towards the end of last winter to now, is that any of the nesting creatures, birds, squirrels with young and that sort of thing, are now not being impacted. Also, there was not a lot of damage done by either the hurricane or the microburst event. I was frankly shocked when I drove by there. I expected to see half of these trees down in just a haystack, and surprisingly, they're a little tougher than they look. So, it's fortunate.
I don't have any. Mr. Holmes?
Yes, just one comment, I guess. there's no such committee, but as the chairman, I had to take a few actions last week, and I wanted to make a comment on that. The Board of Selectmen, by charter, do not get involved with day-to-day business, as you know. Last week, if anybody was paying attention, as I was, I witnessed leaders, to include Chief of Police, the chief of our fire districts, maintenance, and all of our department heads, and all of the district people, really the town of Wareham, come together. Mrs. Begley was there on Sunday night. Mrs. Winslow was there. The town moderator was there. I don't know if you guys were there. Anyway, we didn't discuss anything. I don't even think we talked to each other. It's no open meeting violation.
No, I believe I was mad at you.
But to sit there, well, that's fine. I'm used to that. But the point is that to watch these professionals, these folks know their business. They have a plan. They have procedures. They follow these procedures. And I think they just did an amazing job to keep the public safety first and foremost during the storm. Secondly, I'd like to make a comment about this young man sitting down. I always call him the kid, and that's really out of no disrespect, but he's really a lot younger than I am. But to watch this young man administer the town, he's only been here, he hasn't really been in that job a long time, but to watch him coordinate things, it was really a job well done, Mr. Sullivan. And if you'd pass on from the board, our thanks to all of the team that worked. We've had some discussion, comments about maybe having a little tea or get together for the town folks and the district folks, and just to say thank you for a job well done. If any of the board members want to comment on that subject, that would be fine. Mrs. Begley.
I would. I went through Pinehurst, and I went through in the morning, and it had been devastated by a great deal of the properties had been devastated by the microburst. And I went by later in the afternoon, and it was extraordinary the amount of work that got done. I mean, there were townspeople everywhere, and I have to agree with Mr. Chair that the meeting that I attended at the police station, every single base was covered. I mean, they already had it all set that if they knew where the low-lying areas were and where the flooding would occur, and they had ambulances and fire apparatus and rescue apparatus positioned throughout the town so that there would not be a second of delay.
For example,
should someone be in need.
Did you know that they put those fire trucks in that building up the street from the house? Did you know that?
Yes.
They did that across from Bay Point?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Well, they discussed it during that meeting.
No, I mean that's part of their procedure. I've
At
never seen
Lacasse.
fire trucks there before.
Right, they were at Lacasse Station. But because they knew that there were parts of Point Independence or parts of Onset that would be underwater. But everything was so professional, and I know that, a huge shout out to the Board of Health, because I know that they dedicated a lot of time and an extraordinary amount of effort to provide for anyone that needed shelter here at the Multi-Service Center. And I know some of the people that did stay because whatever their circumstances were, and they just sang the praises of the staff. So it's very, very much appreciated.
Mr. Chairman and Selectman Begley, I'd like to echo your comments and your thanks and your praise of both the town departments, both fire and water districts for their hard work. Just as a caution, I want to remind people that what we experienced through Hurricane Sandy was a glancing blow. I don't want people to think that this is what a strong hurricane is like when it hits this town. They are incredibly dangerous. The scope that would happen if this town were hit by a category 2 storm at high tide would be similar to what you saw happen in Staten Island. So I want everybody to be mindful of that. Don't think that just because Irene hit us a glancing blow and didn't do all that much damage except knock out some power and down some trees. And then again, the same with this storm, that we're not still under the gun going forward for a serious event. So, and to the extent that these responses that we saw just in the past week or so served as a dress rehearsal, I'm a lot more confident about the ability of the town to deal with a severe incident going forward. It shows that the emergency management plan that we were presented with in the summertime actually works, that the coordination between the sort of players on the team is there. And I'm glad in a sense that they had a practice run, even though Selectman Begley looking out her into her yard may not share that sentiment as she deals with the cost of getting rid of some trees, but all in the public interest.
I think what's actually should be noticed as well, not only did the process work well, but the hidden things you don't know about. We have to basically put records together. We have to keep a record of everything we spend, how we do it, and everything else. And a lot of towns don't realize exactly the process. And with FEMA, if you don't basically dot your I's and everything else, you end up getting nothing. And everything was in place and everything was ready to go. And as far as any costs go, we probably will be reimbursed fully for everything we've done. And it's a separate thank you. I was away, obviously, during the time, which was lucky, although I still had a Sandy around, a different one. I actually got phone calls letting me know my house was okay from the people from the town, the departments, etc. And I'd like to have an extra thanks for that as well. Thank you.
Well, do I get a turn? I thanked them when I was there Sunday night. You know, this group of people leaves their homes and their families not knowing what will happen to them so that they can keep us safe. And for that, we're very, very much appreciative. But there was one thing that I noticed. You know, our emergency responders have always been very good at the planning and the moving of equipment. But during Hurricane Irene, there was an issue with the people who are medically dependent upon electricity. And we always receive a list of the addresses and things like that. But right before Hurricane Irene, it came in and it didn't look right. But there was just no time, you know, between when we got the list and when the hurricane hit. And unfortunately, those people were identified through calls to 911 and trips to Toby. But Lieutenant Walsek, and I mentioned him by name because I know that this is something that he really worked hard at to make sure we actually had not only a really good list this time, but he had a firm plan in place. Each individual was called the night before, explained to what the plan was in the event of a power loss at that location, and the plans were put in place as to each individual's need. If that person had a generator, the fuel would be taken to them. I was quite impressed with, you know, sometimes it's hard for people to look back and say, this could have been better, we could have done this better, but really that was one part of Irene that needed improvement, and they took the bull by the horns and they really put something great in place. And I felt very confident that anybody who had a medically necessary device was safe through that storm. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. Chair, there's just one last thing. I'll relay that information to the departments and everybody there. There were also some great volunteers that were in this building that left their houses and were down there and ready to care for the people that were coming in. So if I didn't say them, they're greatly appreciated as well. So thank you.
So with all that, motion to adjourn? Aye.